All right, chapter 13. Don't laugh, it makes it easier for and I have to download them and figure this all out. So they're going to bed. The spider was weaving them some nice, comfy, and cozy, I bet hammocks. A few minutes later, Miss Spider had made the first bed. It was hanging from the ceiling, suspended by a rope of threads at either end, so it actually looked more like a hammock than a bed. But it was a magnificent affair, and the stuff was all made shimmering like silk in pale light. "I hope you find it comfortable," Miss Spider said to the old green grasshopper. "I made it as soft as silky as possible as I could. I spun it with gossamer. That's a much better quality thread than the one that I use for my own web." "Thank you so much, dear old lady," the old green grasshopper said, climbing into the hammock. "And this is just what I needed. Good night, everybody." "Good night." Then Miss Spider spun the next hammock, and the ladybug got in. After that, she spun a long one for Centipede, and an even longer one for the earthworm. "And how would you like your bed?" she said to James, when it came to his turn. "Hard or soft?" "I like it soft, thank you very much," James answered. For goodness sakes, stop staring around the room and get on with those boots," the centipede said. "You and I are never going to get any sleep at this rate. And kindly line them up neatly in pairs as you take them off. Don't just throw them over your shoulder." James worked away frantically on the centipede's boots. Each one had laces. They had to be untied and loosened before it could be pulled off. To make matters worse, all the laces were tied up in the most complicated knots that had to be unpicked with fingernails. It was just awful, awful, awful. It took about 2 hours, and by the time James had pulled off the last boot and had lined them all up in rows on the floor, 21 pairs altogether, the centipede was fast asleep. Of course he was. "Wake up, centipede," James whispered, giving him a gentle dig in the stomach. "It's time for bed." I would have, yelled in his ear. I'm just saying. Maybe a whistle. "Thank you, dear child," the centipede said, opening his eyes, and then he got down from the sofa and ambled across the room, crawled into his hammock. James got into his own hammock, and oh, how soft and comfortable it was compared to the hard, bare floor that his aunts had always made him sleep upon at home. "Lights out," the centipede said drowsily. Nothing happened. "Turn out the light," he called, raising his voice. James glanced around the room, wondering which one of the others he might be talking to. But they were all asleep. The old green grasshopper was snoring so loudly through his nose. The ladybug was making a whistling sound as she breathed. An earthworm was coiled up like a spring on one end of the hammock, wheezing and blowing through his open mouth. And as for Miss Spider, she made a lovely web for her room across one corner of the room, and James could hear her crouching right in the very center of it, mumbling softly in her dreams. "I said, turn out the lights," shouted the centipede. "Are you talking to me?" James asked. "Of course I'm not talking to you, there's a swear word. The centipede answered. "That crazy glowworm has gone to sleep with her light on again." For the first time since entering the room, James glanced up at the ceiling. And there he saw the most extraordinary sight. Something that looked like a gigantic fly without wings. It was at least 3 feet long. It was standing upside down with its 6 legs in the middle of the ceiling, and its tail end of this creature seemed to be literally on fire. A brilliant greenish light, as bright as the electric bulb, was shining out of its tail and lighting up the whole room. "Is that a glowworm?" James asked, staring at the light. "Doesn't look like a worm of any sort to me." "Of course it's a glowworm," the centipede answered. "At least that's what she calls herself. Although, actually, you are quite right. She isn't really a worm at all. Glowing worms are never worms. They're simply lady fireflies without wings." "Wake up, you lazy beast!" but Glowworm did not stir. So the centipede reached out of the hammock and picked up one of his boots from the floor. "Put out the wretched light," he shouted, and he hurled one of his shoes up to the ceiling. The glowworm slowly opened one eye, and she stared at the centipede. "There is no need to be rude," she said. "All in good time." Come on, shouted the centipede, "or I'll put it out for you." "Oh, hello, James," the glowworm said, looking down, giving James a little wave and a smile. "I didn't see you come in. Welcome, my dear boy, welcome, and good night." Then, click, out went the light. James Trotter lay there in the darkness with his eyes wide open, listening to the strange sleeping noises of the creatures were making all around him, and wondering what on earth was happening to him in the morning. Already he was beginning to like his new friends very much. They were not as terrible as they looked. In fact, they weren't really terrible at all. They seemed extremely kind and helpful in spite of it all. The shouting and the arguing that went on between them seemed like friends. "Good night, old grasshopper," he whispered. "Good night, ladybug, Miss Spider." But before he could get them through them all, he fell fast asleep. Do you have any more insight on where this big adventure might go? Think his aunts are going to join him inside the peach? Do you think these bugs were always nice, or do you think those green things made them nice? I don't know. Chapter 14. Maybe we'll find out more. See you in a bit.